Good afternoon. I'm Laura Zervos, and I'm a registered and licensed dietitian. And today I'm happy to present the nutrition component for the Lending Hearts program. And today is very exciting as the weather is getting a little bit cooler here in Western Pennsylvania. Our program today is hearty and healthy soups. We try to look to soups in the wintertime. They're a great addition to our regular meal. They could help curb your appetite. They could help if you're trying to increase calories. There's things you could add to your soup, so you're getting the most bang for your buck in that soup if you're trying to add calories to your diet. So soups are great, and we're going to make 3 today. So very excited about that. One takes a little bit longer to cook, so we're going to start that one first. The other 2 are pretty simple, and there's many variations from them as well. So really, we're going to learn more than 3 soups today. And all of these recipes will be posted. There will be a link on the Lending Hearts website, and you could get to those recipes if you're interested. And you are always free to email me as well. So let's get started. The first soup that we're going to make today is a baked potato and leek soup. And what I like about this soup is it's very hearty. I highly recommend the night before baking your potatoes, or the day before, whenever you get a chance to do that. There's nothing that takes the place of that baked potato taste. Microwaving them, that shortcut, it's not going to give you that hearty taste that you get in a real cooked baked in the oven potato that's been baked in the oven for about an hour. Remember, you're always going to scrub these because we are going to be using the skin. So you want to scrub these very well with a vegetable scrubber, and you want to poke holes in them to let out the steam as you're cooking them. That steam builds up and it could cause a little explosion in your oven that's not too fun to clean out. So they're going to cook about an hour, and I did cook mine ahead of time so they could be cool, and you could see how we're going to work with them. So the first step would be to prepare your baked potatoes. The second step is the second ingredient that we talked about were leeks, and this is a leek. Leek is in the same family. It's the allium family or the lily family. Also, garlic is in that family as well, scallions, shallots, and onions. So we typically use the white. You could use some of this stripy part as well. We don't really use the leaves too much. We do use the leaves. You would use them when you're making other things. If you're making a stock, you would take the whole leaf like this and cut it, and sometimes you make 2. And this is called a Bouquet Garni, and you would put some peppercorns in here and some thyme and some parsley, and you would wrap it up nice and tightly like this, and you would put some string in there, and you would insert it into your soup, and then whenever you're done, you would pull it right out. But this imparts a lot of flavor, a lot of depth into our soups and stocks. So that's the only use that I see for those. Like I said, the best use is this white part, and that's what's really tender and what's packed with a lot of flavor. So let me show you here on our cutting board, and I will adjust the camera here so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to discard this part right here, this real thin part, and we will cut it here as well. And we'll reserve that over here, and I have some of my potatoes over here, just excuse me for that. And we're gonna cut, and we're gonna cut again. And once again, this has already been washed. And then you see all the layers in here. Lots of layers. So there's a couple things you could do. If you remember when we were talking about cutting and prepping vegetables, we always say to create a flat spot first. If I were to go to cut this now, it's moving all over the place. There's a chance I could cut my fingers. So you want to lay it on the flat part, cut in half, and cut in half, and that's all you need to do. That's what the size we're looking for right there. Set that aside. And again, cut in half, cut in half, cut in half, and we are good. And you need about 2.5 cups of these leeks. And I've already started sauteing them in my stock pot, and I'm going to also add some garlic. So let me bring that pot over here so I can show you what that looks like. And what we did was we took, I'll show you here. Those are our scallions, I mean our leeks, but we can, scallions we're gonna put at the end. We're gonna do our leeks and our garlic. We have 2 cloves of minced garlic, and minced means not sliced, but crushed real thin, or if you have a garlic press, that's the yield out of a garlic press, the minced garlic. So about 2 cloves there. And then I've already started some leeks, but we're gonna add some of these other ones where I got that little leaf from that keeps bothering me here. And we're gonna stir these around for about 10 minutes. They have been sauteing for close to 10 minutes now. And we'll let that go a little bit further. And while that's sauteing, we're going to work on our potatoes. And all that's in here is 4 tablespoons of butter. You could use salted or unsalted, it does not matter. Great salt. If you are using salted, you may need to cut that down in the salt that you add to it. So next, we're going to prepare our potatoes. And what I've done so far is I've cut the potatoes in half lengthwise, and then I have quartered them. So, and I've scooped out that flesh with a spoon or a paring knife, just like this. And we're going to reserve this for our soup. Some of them we're going to chop up. Some of them we're going to add at the very end, just so in case you like to have a little bite of potato soup and not just a thick broth. But all of these, we're going to use 6 potatoes, between 4 and 6 large baking potatoes. And these are baking potatoes, or restaurant potatoes. I highly recommend this. You're not going to get enough flesh out of a new potato or a Yukon Gold or anything like that. And these have the perfect starch content for our soup. Also russet, so any of those. Some of these we're going to add to our soup. We're just going to roughly chop them, and that'll add a nice addition to our soup because we're going to have the skin. The other ones we're just going to put aside. I like to save these. These could be snacks. They could be an appetizer. You could just add some cheddar cheese to this and bacon or scallions and some sour cream and a nice little snack at night. So we're going to save some of those, and the other ones we have chopped here, and we're going to add that to our bowl. And I'm just going to give my leeks a little stir. Get the camera over to there. You can hear it sizzling. So let's cut the rest of our potatoes. Again, we're going to do in half. Let me adjust the camera. Half, and then half again. And then we're going to scoop out that flesh, just like that. Put that over there. We're going to reserve the skin. Some of it we're going to use, and like I said, some we will save for later. Other one over there. I will use that skin, and again. Scoop it out, and you could use a spoon or a sharp paring knife, either way. And just like that. That one didn't want to come out as nicely, but that's okay. We'll still use that. So these, some of them I'm going to, like I said, we're going to put some of these in aside. We're just going to give them a nice little chop. Now just think about this when you're eating them, you would want a nice bite size. We don't want to leave any too large. So about a ½ inch dice, and these are not perfect. So we're not going to get a perfect square, but just so they could fit on your spoon. All right, so that's enough to reserve. And I'm just going to put those aside in my little bowl here. Okay, well, our shallots are on their way. It's been a few minutes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add our broth and water. And now's the time when our shallots really cook. We saute them, and we saute the garlic to get the most flavor out of that. And we're extracting that. And now we're going to add the stock where they'll be able to cook a little bit longer. So let's add that next. Stock brewing right back here. And I'm currently going to add about 4 cups, and we're going to get a little sizzling when we do it. Adding our hot stock, and that's going to continue to cook our leeks. And that's got a nice little rolling boil to it. So they should cook nicely while we're finishing up with our potatoes. And allow that to cook a little bit longer and allow those leeks to get nice and tender. Okay, so that's going to cook. We'll put the rest of our potatoes aside. What we're going to do is rough chop these with the skin, and they're going to be added to our soup, and they're going to get cooked now as well. And it doesn't, these do not have to be perfect because there's a step later that we're going to do in there. So it doesn't have to be any particular size. We're going to hit this with the blender later. So whatever size you have in there is good. The only ones that needed to be uniform were the ones that we're going to add at the very end for the finished product. The ones that are going to be cooked, not so much. So we're just going to add those right now, along with our leek, just to get some of that taste together. And then the next thing we'll be doing is weighing those. So we're going to allow that one to cook a little longer. Okay, so let's put that prep aside for that one, and we will start on our next soup. Okay, our next soup. And what I like about this soup is, you know, the first one with the leeks, we had to saute them in butter first, right? And our other soup, we're going to use some butter. This soup uses no fat. It's an excellent soup. It's high in lycopene because it used a canned tomato. I actually used crushed in this one. And it's extremely high in fiber because I'm putting some black beans in there as well, some corn. So getting some phytonutrients from all of this. And the thing about this one too is you can keep it vegan. We are going to use a chicken stock today, but you could also use a vegan stock. There's plenty of vegetable stocks out there that are very good. Even if you used water, it would be okay, but I still think the vegan stock gives a little bit more of a hearty stock and a soup with a little bit more depth and taste. I like to do that. I think that gives it a little bit more, like I said, more depth to the soup, and it's not going to be just like you threw a bunch of things together. So the thing about this is, and this is very, very important, you don't want to substitute any of these ingredients that we're going to be adding. No substitutions at all, or you will not get the correct product. So let's just move aside our from the potato soup, and we'll come back to that one in a minute. And for this one, we're going to use our food processor. And I can't imagine making this without a food processor because it really processor over here. So here's our food processor. And it's typical home version. The restaurant versions are just a little bit sturdier, but these are still very, it's an excellent product. So the first thing we're going to do is we have our blade in there. Always have your blade in there first. And the first is a good bunch of fresh washed cilantro, and I washed that this morning. And I put it through a salad spinner to remove off any excess moisture. You don't want to dilute your soup. So you always want to make sure that you wash it ahead of time and let ample time for it to dry. So we're going to add our cilantro. And it doesn't have to be there any special way. And let me to put that in as well. 4 cloves of garlic. And we're also going to, and I just use a large white Spanish onion, probably 3/4 of it. And we put it in there just like that. Just slice it down a little bit so it gets pulse. And then I also have 1 jalapeno pepper. So we're going to put all that in there. Just clean it, matter of putting it all back together. So we're just going to just the camera so you can see. This makes a wonderful base. Scrape it down off the sides, and I'm just checking to make sure that everything is uniform. And if you could just smell this, oh my goodness. And this makes a wonderful, wonderful base for our soup. So this again is 1 large Spanish onion, 1 bunch of cilantro, 4 cloves of garlic, and a jalapeno. You don't have to use a jalapeno. When I said there's no substitutions, if a jalapeno is too hot for you, you could always use a mild chili. That would work very well too. So either one. So we're going to add that to our stock pot. And let me show you this here. Hold on 1 second. Let me move our. We're going to plate. And all of that goodness in there. And again, I wish you could smell this. This is one of my favorite soups to make if I'm going somewhere. If you're going to a football party, I go to an event every year where we bring a potluck lunch, and there'll be all kinds of things. And I always pull out my soup, and everybody is always delighted with it because it can get a little spicy, and it is also very satisfying. Okay, at this time, we're also going to add. I'm going to do the crushed tomatoes, and we're going to add 3 quarts of chicken stock. And again, if I use a very weak chicken stock because I don't want to have that overpower it, but you don't want to use water either. And you could also use vegetable stock for a vegan option. Okay, so we're going to do that, and then we are going to this is another one that you could adjust. This one is cumin, and I like to put a good heaping 2 tablespoons in there. It gives it a wonderful flavor. And 2 teaspoons. But I like to add a little fresh squeezed lime juice, and I add a 1/4 cup of that. We'll give that a stir, and then we're going to add a few other things here. And then I will show you what this looks like. Some black beans, and I used canned black beans for this one, and you could use fresh if they were, dried, and you could cook them and add them. This is what I happen to have on hand today, and it's convenient. I did 2 cans of beans, and you could make these low sodium. You could make them. I happen to choose like an organic one today. You don't have to do that. Still going to make a really nice hearty soup. So let's give this a stir, and then we're going to return this to the heat. And you could feel as I'm stirring it, it's packed. And I'm going to put it in a bowl later and show it to you, but it has a nice red color. And if you're looking to add more calories, if you need to add more calories to your dietary pattern, you could certainly add 1 cup of 1 or 2 cups of a cooked shredded chicken. You could even add beef. I always garnish with cheese at the end, right in the bowl. But those are some options. So you could add more protein and more calories. And again, I would add cooked chicken. I would either bake it in the oven. I don't recommend microwave, but it's certainly the second best choice. And that way you could pull it apart. I would say between 1 and 1.5 cups, and add it to your soup. And that just makes it more of a meal. Then you don't have to add too much of this. You already have your protein and all your vegetables in there and your starch. So it's really an all-in-one meal. So let's return this one to the stove, and we're going to come back to our leeks. And our leeks is looking very good. So it has had a chance to cook. And our leeks are very tender. I could pierce them with a fork. And now what we're going to do is we're going to blend this soup. So this soup gets its thickness and its heartiness from not only the starch in the potatoes, but now we're going to use a blender and further like pulverize those potatoes to make more of a consistent texture. And there's a few ways you could use this. You could put this into a regular blender, which would work just fine. The problem with a regular blender is that you risk getting burned. That's a very real risk because the blender does leak. So if you were to use a blender, I would recommend use a blender. Whenever you put the blender on the stand, you would want to take a dish towel. Always, always, always do this. You would take a dish towel and you would cover the top of your blender because that can get out and that can get very hot. Here, let that get cooking, and then we could show you how we're going to serve that one. Blender, it's very important that you would want to cover the top so none leaks out and you don't get burned. Today we're going to use a hand blender. Hand blenders are a wonderful tool for having in your kitchen. If you don't have one, I highly recommend it. They're good for when you're standing at the stove and you want to, they're very convenient anywhere that, as long as you have electric, they're very convenient. And I believe there are some battery powered ones as well. This one you have to be very careful because this is an extremely sharp blade in here. It moves very fast, and that's what's going to pulverize our food. But you never want to put your fingers near there. That could cause a big problem because that blade does not know if that's your fingers or a potato, right? So you always have to your fingers there or press the button by accident. So we're going to switch out our food processor and hook up our blender. Excuse me, our hand blender. The blade snaps on like this, and let me show you. We're just going to go up and down. This is why our leeks have to be nice and tender. If not, they're not going to, they're going to pulverize. And that's why we didn't have to make our skins too. I'm going to add a few more skins. And you want to make sure that you just work straight up and down in small batches. And we're going to add a little bit of our potato skins that are right here, just to add a little bit more texture. It looks like we're a little bit thin there. So just add a little bit more. Again, we haven't added any flour to this on the starch from the potatoes. And there's a couple ways that you could thicken your soups. You could always thicken them with some type of fat and flour. You could always thicken them with cornstarch. But this, we're relying on the starch from the potato and the mechanical thickening of the puree process. Another thing that we do, and we're not going to discuss it later, is the addition of cream. And what I like about this recipe is it seems we seem to have a nice consistency here, and I can show you. Just run that one more time here. Now we are going to add our last ingredient here before we add our cooked. We just rinse this off because we know this starch on here is going to dry and it will get like a paste. You rinse it very well after each next, our next step is to combine the sour cream and the milk that we're going to add here. So we're going to take 1 cup of milk and 1 cup of sour cream, and we're just going to fold those together right here. I think I said 1 cup. It's actually 1/2 equal parts of sour cream and milk. in here. We're just going to stir those together. And I'm using low-fat milk and low-fat sour cream. It comes out pretty good. I don't think you need to use the full fat. You still get the same flavor. So we have those whisked together, and we're going to add that to our soup and stir that in, and we're going to return it to the heat. And we're going to also add a little bit of cheese at that time. So I have 1 cup of shredded for our toppings, but we're going to use most of it. Just stir it right in there, and then we'll return it to the heat. Stir. This is looking really good. And it's nice because with the potato skins, can you see that there? With the potato skins, it adds some color to it. It adds some brown flecks, and you have the nice cream. And this is a very nice consistency. So I'm going to return it to the heat for 1 minute to let the cheese melt. And how you can go ahead and serve this. Here. And we'll also check on our tortilla. Like it's doing really well. To cook, I would say around, around a half hour, 45 minutes at the most. There's no need to cook it any longer than 45 minutes, but that gives ample time for that onions and the garlic to cook well, to cook through. You don't want to have it that it's uncooked. So I would recommend somewhere between a half hour and 45 minutes to allow all the flavor to come together and get the tomato, get a little bit of the acid out of the tomatoes too. So that is that soup. So we're going to let our baked potato soup go. We still have a couple more steps with that. Let's show, well, we could wait to show how the to turn out. I want to talk about the next soup that we're going to make. And we are going to make a cream of broccoli soup. And this is one of my favorite soups to make because it could be any vegetable soup. It could be cream of asparagus, cream of green bean, cream of mushroom, cream of celery, cream of cauliflower, cream of carrot, any kind of vegetable that you have. And you could also mix vegetables. It's so versatile. It's just knowing the 5 steps of making a soup, a cream soup. And there's even variations on that as well. So let's get started on that while our other soups are cooking. So let me we're going to do the broccoli. So let me show you how I'm going to prepare that. It's right here. I will adjust the camera. And if you remember on our vegetable segment, we just want to remember we were just we're just going to pull these apart. And I had already cut off the very bottom of this. There's probably 2 inches here. So you could cut this piece as well. And we could take off that leaf. And you could cut, what we're going to do is cut and discard this edge all around here. That edge, we're just going to take off where it's a little bit darker green. That is contains some undigestible fiber. It could give you a little bit of a stomach ache. And you can see as we're peeling it away. But there is so much flavor in here. So you wouldn't want to, my kids like to eat this raw. It has a really good taste. Little pungent, but and high in sulfur compounds, but very delicious. So we just want to make sure that we have removed all of that. And then you can see here too, that part has a little brown spot on it. So just remove all of those traces of that really white part. Okay, and then we're just going to, again, this is another soup that's going to be blended. So we don't need to make sure that these are perfect uniform size. In the broccoli soup, we're not going to reserve any. So we're going to use all of this. Now this part is a lot more tender, but that base, I'm not going to put the leaves in. And then for this, we're just going to remember when we did the prep, not just chopping, because we're going to lose all of the vegetable, but we are going to just put our knife in and gently pull apart. Put our knife in and gently pull apart. In and pull apart. In and pull apart, just like so. Okay. And the thing about this is, and then afterwards you could chop that down further, but you want to make sure that you pull it apart first so you don't lose any of these florets. And if you want to, it's important too, when you're trying to make this soup quickly, you would want to make sure that your pieces are uniform in size. So that will guarantee that everything does cook quickly, okay? Cut some other broccoli right here, and we're going to add all of this to our pan, and we're going to saute it. That is the first S. The first S is saute. So we're just going to take about 4 tablespoons of butter for a whole head of broccoli, or if you were using cauliflower, a whole head of cauliflower, or if you're using I would recommend a pound of carrots, probably the same for celery. Mushrooms, probably 2 8-ounce containers. So something like that would be your ratio. So let me just add this here. We already have our butter melted. I'm just going to add a little bit more. And the thing that's important to remember that we are not, at this time, we are not, we're not cooking the broccoli right now. Yes, we're starting to cook it, but we're not, this is not the role of this particular step. This step is to just coat the broccoli in a nice coating of butter. So this is the saute. It's not where the broccoli will actually be cooked, but it is where it will get coated with butter. So let's get this back on the stove, and we'll bring out our potato and leek that is doing very nicely. And I cannot wait for you to see this. And I wish you were here to smell it because it smells delicious. This is our baked potato, and this doesn't need too much time. We were just basically, because we had cooked our leeks thoroughly, we cooked them again in the stock. Our potatoes were cooked. Then we put our sour cream and milk in there, and then we put our cheese. So we were just trying to get that done. So let me get a nice ladle here. Before I do that, we are going to add that reserved potato that I talked about. Again, this is just like a 1/2 inch dice of potato that we're going to add. It's going to add a little bit of, right now, this is pretty consistent, pretty homogeneous. It's a thickened soup. It has a nice consistency to it, but if we add the potato, it'll just give a little bit extra when you're actually eating it. So we're just going to stir that in, and you don't need to have too much, probably a cup or so. And then we're just going to take our ladle and just move that around. And I just cannot wait for you to see this soup, how beautiful it is and thick. And it's just so satisfying. So I'm going to get a nice bowl here. And adjust this so you could see the soup. Oh, looks so good. So there is our soup. You try to, there you go. You could see that. And you can put, at this time, you could add a little bit more cheese. You could add some bacon that I just crisped up. So add a little bit of bacon. And a little nod back to the baked potato. You could add some scallions or some chives. And you could even add another dollop of whipped cream if you like. But doesn't that look delicious? Oh my goodness. So nice. All those flavors really come together nicely, and that makes this makes a nice hearty meal too. Or this can be made ahead if you have a chance to do your soups on the weekend, or whatever your weekend is. If you work on the weekends, whatever your day off is that you have dedicated to meal prep and menu planning, is something nice that you could do, because what's better, maybe now some of us are at home, but still we don't have time to make ourselves a full-blown lunch during our lunch hour. We're usually sitting there eating, maybe doing a little reading at the same time, or meditating if you have a chance. But it's nice when you have your lunch already made and all you have to do is heat it up. This heats up well in the microwave. You could also put put it back in a saucepan if you like, a 1 or a 2 quart saucepan, depending on how many people you're serving, and it heats up very nicely. And this will keep nicely for a week at least. And like I said, this is a real hearty thing. This is nice for when the kids get home from school. It's like a warm hug. And like I said, I like taking hot things to lunch too. Sometimes just makes you feel a little bit better, makes the day go a little bit better. So let's put this aside. And I wish you could see it because it's very shiny. It has a nice shiny sheen to it. And that's a sign of a good sauce. So let's just rinse off our ladle so we could use it for our next soup. And I'm just going to set this one right here. And I think our broccoli is still, we're still coating that. We're going to let that go a little bit longer. Turn it up. For this one, we are also going to add some hot stock, and let me just show you how I do that. 1 quart saucepan, and we're just going to add a little bit of water and to it. We could also use a commercially prepared one. It's whatever you have time for, or you could use a little bit of both, either whatever you like. So for this one, though, we are going to make our, I'm going to heat this up a little bit. Okay, so that's going, and we're going to give our broccoli a stir. And let's see, while we're doing that, let me get that out for you. The second step in the soup is called singer, S-I-N-G-E-R, and that comes from the French word to dust. So after the first part is sauté, the second one is singer. There's 5 S's to make any soup, any cream soup or any puree soup. So we want to dust it with the flour. And what that's going to do is that's going to combine with the fat. So not only are we going to get the thickening from the puree part of it, we also going to get the thickening from adding the fat and the flour together. So this one is going to be a little bit different than our other soup, the potato soup. But remember, we had the starch from the potato, and that's what made that so thick. So that's why I love these soups. Not too much fat added to them, especially like I said, the chicken tortilla, no fat added to that. But these other two, we're not relying on heavy cream for that one. We were just using milk, half cup of milk and a half cup of sour cream for the whole recipe, which serves 6. So when you think about that, that goes pretty far. So let's pull our broccoli off the stove, and then we're going to flour that nicely here. And we're going to bring that over, and I'm going to take a half cup of flour. And second part is singer, so we're just going to dust. And that's all we're doing. And it's going to look a little funny, and when you're stirring it, it's going to get a little bit lumpy, but you just keep stirring. Just keep stirring, get working, incorporate all of that, the flour into all those, the way we had coated the broccoli, and the butter is in all through the floret. So now we're going to make sure we get the butter into all of that, right? So we're going to just work that in. So we had a half cup of butter, and we had a half cup of flour. So we're just going to keep going here. And I will show you what this looks like. And it's not, it doesn't look like it's finished yet. It just looks like some flour on our, and so it just looks like some flour, that's some sauteed broccoli that has been floured and dusted. So let me get that right there for you. That looks pretty good, right? So before we return that to the stove, we're going to get our hot stock ready. So let me add the bouillon to the hot stock. And I don't add too much. Again, I like to get the flavor of the vegetables. You just want a small amount of stock. It just has to be doesn't have to be too strong at all. It's also going to add the salt. So you want to make sure to remember anytime that you're using a bouillon or a stock commercially, this one has less sodium, then it's not going to affect the taste, but you want to make sure that you adjust your own sodium. And the same for the bouillons or the bouillon cubes. Some of those are heavily salted, so you would want to make sure that you taste your soup prior to seasoning because it may be too salty. And you can always add more. It's very difficult to take away. There are some old wives' tale about adding potato to it, maybe that the starch will soak up some of the sodium. That could be very difficult to do. So again, you could always add more later, season, taste it first, and then season later. And that's part of our steps. So we finished 2 steps. We have sauteed and we have sanged. The next step is also an S, and that's called add your hot stock. So we're going to add our hot stock right now. And that's right here. And we're just going to add a little over a quart. And get all that out of there. Very good. Okay, and now we're going to give this a stir. And you're going to see like already before we've even pureed the soup, it's starting to thicken. So you may need to add more stock later, and we could do that. So again, when we were talking about the leeks before, and the leeks actually cooked once we add our hot stock, and we said that the role of sauteing wasn't necessarily to cook the broccoli, it's more just to coat the broccoli. Now's the time when we cook the broccoli. So it already got a little par cooked, so it has a little head start, but now we're going to finish that cooking while it simmers. And simmer is our 4th S. So far we've had saute, sange, add hot stock, and now we're going to simmer for a few minutes. So I'm going to return this to the stove and bring our tortilla soup over while that's cooking, and we'll show some serving suggestions for that as well. You just wipe off my place right here, and we'll bring this over. This looks beautiful. And oh my goodness, this smell is amazing. And that is just from all of that. It's all that work that we did at the beginning, the cilantro, the garlic, the pepper if you added it, or you could use mild green chilies. And again, if you were going to add the chicken, now would be the time to do it and let it, if it was cooked chicken, and let it incorporate a little bit longer. Since we have not done that, this soup is ready to go. So let's get our ladle. And okay, so we're going to, and you may need to, oh yeah, you want to get down and get all of this. It's just such a beautiful color. And if you want it to get a little bit thicker, you could always just cook it a little bit longer, crack your lid. I think it's perfect right where it's at. This is our soup. I'll show you. So that looks delicious. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to add a few toppings to it. So you have look how colorful they both look. I just love looking at these. Okay, so we're going to add this. You could also add some tortilla strips or some tortilla chips, or dip some tortilla chips into here. You could put scallions on here. Seems like scallions were the theme today. And then we could also, let me get this ready here. We could also put a little avocado right on top to just add a little bit of creaminess. Right off. Oh, does that look good? And you could dice it so you get a little spoonful with every bite. There you go. And this one also, you could put a little dollop of sour cream on this one. So either one, you could always add additional sour cream if you like that. Again, we could adjust the spiciness. We used the jalapeno peppers, which I'm going to give this one a little taste just to see. This was one jalapeno pepper. I've always used the mild green chili, so let's just see what this one tastes like. So good, perfect. It's not the jalapenos. People think that they're one of the hotter peppers. They do give some flavor. It depends too. Depends how they're prepared. When they're canned, sometimes they seem to, when you get them out of a jar rather, and they put them on nachos when you go to the ballpark, or you get them as an appetizer, they could be very strong. But sometimes when they're raw, they're a little bit easier to handle. And this one, we cooked them a little bit, and it's actually very mild. This soup is not spicy at all. And again, that was one jalapeno for this whole recipe, which had 3 quarts of stock and about 2.5 cups of crushed tomato. And in addition to, now we had drained the corn and the beans. You could also use frozen corn. And like I said, you could also use the beans that you have cooked yourself. You would want to either cook them, there's 2 ways. You could either soak your beans overnight, excuse me, or you could do the quick method, which is to put the beans in some water, let them boil for 5 minutes, and so-called quick, they still have to sit there for an hour with a lid on in that water that was boiling that you took off the stove. Just let them sit in there for an hour. It's either that or soak them overnight. Either way, that's an economical way too. The price of a bag of beans, I bought some the other day, about $2.79, and I think the can of beans was around $2.59. So not too much price difference there. It's just whatever you have the time and what your preference is. So both quality products. So I'm going to return this to the stove. We're going to wash our ladle off here. And we'll get back to the broccoli soup. And again, that could be done with any kind of vegetables you have on hand, or a mixture of vegetables. So this is doing really nicely. Doing real nicely. We're just going to give it another stir. And you could see that I'm going to show you here in 1 second. I'm going to bring that over. That it's it has nice and thickened. And I'm going to stab the broccoli to make sure that it's fork tender. That's what you want. Good. Let me show you what this looks like. Camera down here. So it's already getting a little bit thick. You could see that. This one, I think we should use our blender so I could demonstrate to you how to be safe. Okay, so let's clear our area here and get all our prep out of the way that we were using before. Now, again, we want to be very careful because this is hot. And we want to always make sure that you have a towel with you. And you probably don't want to use it because it can get some soup on it. Here, I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to take it off of here so I'm not lifting above my head. Okay, and this is not too hot, so we're just going to and you may need to work as fast as you want to make sure you don't overfill your blender. I don't know. Mine says here max liquid, so I'm well under the max liquid. We're going to save our pan. And if you wanted to, we could have reserved a few of these florets here to have for the soup like we did for the potato soup. Let's see if we could get this here. And we did. And this down. And we're going to cover it. Not sure if this. Cover here. And we'll take a peek, and that looks gorgeous. Sounds good. Sounds like we got it. That, and we did not get burned. I seen it come out. This the blender that I have has a nice gasket around the edges, but I have seen some where they have a little hole in the top where a plastic lid comes out, and that seems to be too where you could get some spillage and get burned. So that's just one thing to be cautioned about. So you would always want to do that. I'm going to take this out under. I have to hold my blade in there. Oh, look at this! How gorgeous! And it's going to thicken a little bit more. Going to thicken a little bit more because that flour and that fat to thicken. But and we could stop here. Let's the last S. So we had saute, which meant to just coat with butter. We had sange, which means to dust with flour. Then the third S was add hot stock. The fourth S was to simmer, which we did, in which we cooked our broccoli. And the fifth step is to season. So this one's very important. You might want to, let me just get, depending on what type of stock that you use is going to depend on how much salt you need. So we're just going to grab a little bit out of here. Delicious. Okay. I think it's pretty good. Just get a drink here. A little piece of broccoli go down there, but you have to taste it, so that's important. Now, we could stop here. We're going to return to the heat for a little bit. Just to let it thicken up. We could stop there with our broccoli soup. It's a fine soup. It's thick. It's hearty. If you are trying to get more calories or you do want a thicker soup, what you could do would be to add an egg and some cream to it. And that's called a thickening agent. And it's going to make it nice. It's going to make it a nice glossy soup. It's going to put a nice sheen on that. But it's important that you just don't take a scramble. You don't take an egg yolk and your cream and just drop it right into the soup. You want to make a liaison. And what a liaison is I'll show you. We're going to we would take our egg and we just want the yolk. So we would, let me do it in my. Just want the yolk. Yolk in there. And we could add our cream to it. And you only need about 2 ounces of cream. So about a 1/4 cup of cream and 1 egg yolk. Okay, and we'll mix that together real nicely. My other bowl, and what we will do is we're going to make a liaison. So we have these 2 ingredients mixed, and we're going into our bowl. If we were to add this right to our hot soup right now, what would happen? We would make some scrambled eggs in there. So we don't want that to happen. That's not what we're looking for. So we were going to just add, we're going to take a ladle of this out. And very quickly, we want to add that right here. And let me show you with the so it's nice and creamy now. So there's no chance we've increased the temperature of the eggs and the cream, and we've increased the temperature of those, and we've decreased the temperature of the eggs. So now we're ready to add it back to our soup. So that's just going to give it a little bit creamier texture. Again, if you're looking to increase your calories or your protein, it's an excellent way to do that. Plus, you have a heartier soup that you're ending up with. So let's let that just get a little bit hotter, and then we will serve that soup up as well. Let me see if we have any questions here. Okay, I don't see any hands up, so we must be okay. So to recap, before I do the serving, we'll let that thicken up for 1 minute. To recap, the potato soup was the sauteed leeks and the garlic, and we added the hot stock to that and let that cook a little bit more. And we added some of our potatoes. It was just a rough chop of potatoes because we were going to further pulverize them with our hand blender. So after we added those, we did reserve some potatoes to have in the finished product. So we kept some nice well cubed potatoes for that process. Our tortilla soup, what was special about that was there was no fat added. It's very high in fiber. It's very hearty. You have the option of making it vegan with a vegan stock, and you also have the option of increasing the protein with added chicken, dark meat, white meat, whatever you have. And if you had something left over, you could always do that as well. Garnished both of them so far with this potato soup. We did the bacon and scallions and cheese, anything, just think anything you would like to put on top of your baked potato. It could have been chives or sour cream, whatever you like there, because it's a very hearty tasting baked potato. And don't forget, we had reserved some of the skins too. So you have a little appetizer. So not only are you having your baked potato soup, you also have a little appetizer here where you could just maybe, throw a little bit of cheese on, even some scallions at the end. But I would go ahead and put this back in the warm oven, let this melt, and then you could always add the bacon bits and sour cream or anything else that you would like to have for that snack. So our broccoli soup is ready. Let's go ahead and we will serve that as well. Tortilla soup over. Doing really well. Bring that over here. This is beautiful. And again, we could have reserved some broccoli, some cooked broccoli to put on top of that. Let me show you how our soup turned out. You have the cream of broccoli. We have the baked potato. And we have the tortilla. All beautiful. And remember that cream of broccoli, we could have done that with any vegetable. We could have done the same thing with cauliflower or mushrooms or celery, carrots, green beans, any kind of anything that you're thinking of, or you can make a combination. So think of what vegetables go nice together. Broccoli and cauliflower is always good. Another variation on the broccoli too is we could always add a half cup of cheese to this mixture for a broccoli cheese soup. A broccoli cheddar soup. You don't have to thicken it with the egg yolks and cream. That just makes it creamier. And if you could see, it has a nice, all the soups actually have a very nice sheen, but that one is probably just a little bit more shiny, which is a really nice quality to have on your soup. So that is one thing that I aim for. You want to make sure that that has the proper consistency, the proper viscosity, that is how thick it is, and a nice shine on it. And of course, it has to taste good. So, and you could always season to your own liking. And if you have somebody in the family that's watching their sodium, you could always just wait to salt these at the table instead of even tasting it and salting it now. That's even a better idea. So you could use a low sodium stock. You could use, the low sodium beans or low sodium corn. If you're not making those fresh out of the can, if you're purchasing them out of the can, you could always get the low sodium versions. You could also get low sodium versions of the tomato products as well, if you're looking to do that. Just if you're conscious of those things, or if you need to wash them for health reasons. So I hope you enjoyed our demonstration today, and that's 3 new soups. I will make sure that these recipes are on the Lending Hearts site as well as my own site. And if you have any questions, you could always reach out and email me. I'd be happy to answer these or any other food related questions or nutrition questions or concerns that you have. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.